Our Plant Stories has been nominated as a finalist in the Independent Podcast Awards in a new category called Environment and Natural World. I'll let you know how we get on. Thanks to all those who are regular supporters of the podcast with their commitment to buying a monthly coffee. And to Anne, who also sent some caffeine my way this month, all of which goes towards paying for this podcast, the hosting platform and the editing programme. The link is in the show notes. And now, a plant story. Welcome to Our Plant Stories and a short bonus episode on the monkey puzzle tree. We've heard from Andrea, who bought a house with a monkey puzzle planted in the front garden that she couldn't bring herself to remove, even though, when she first moved in, it was on the list of things to go. We've heard from Eduardo, a Chilean botanist, who told us how the monkey puzzle is the national tree of Chile, and he shared how to grow it too, in a very large space. And we've heard from David, who for 68 years has been tracking a story connecting his great-great-grandfather to the Dropmore monkey puzzle tree, which until its demise in 1903 was the most famous monkey puzzle in the country. David's searches led him deeper into the story of how the first trees came to the UK, and indeed how they became so popular, and he ended up self-publishing a book, sadly sold out now. But I thought we should just allow him the last word to ensure that when we see a monkey puzzle and someone says, "Didn't someone steal the seeds for that from a banquet?" we will be able to tell them the full story as researched by someone who has been piecing it together for years.
You read wonderful things. You'll hear about this banquet in Santiago, which Menzies attends with O'Higgins, an Irishman, by the way, who was the top man, obviously, the Viceroy of Chile. And people visualise palaces and grand banquets, and you'll see the word banquet or feast sometimes used. And then you read Captain Vancouver's diary. Vancouver was the captain who took Menzies to Chile, and he and 5 of his officers and Menzies, so 6 Englishmen, spent 3 days travelling to Santiago, where they indeed do meet with O'Higgins, and they sit down to a meal. And Vancouver describes it as follows. There were just 8 people, 6 Englishmen, O'Higgins and his side hench, and every course was served hot. So you go, it wasn't a banquet, it wasn't a feast, it was just 6 exceedingly weary British sailors who had been forced to ride mules for 3 days, must have had backsides as sore and hot as whatever you care to think about, who were just utterly relieved to relax, and O'Higgins was delighted to be talking in English rather than Spanish, and just had a convivial bloke's evening, being served lots of lovely food. It doesn't stack up. It doesn't stack up. Eduardo is correct. It does not stack up. Because you then look at the whole time. They were only in Chile for 6 weeks. They were 2 weeks arranging the repair of Vancouver's ship because it had a rotten mainmast, and you certainly don't want to sail around the roaring 40s with a rotten mainmast. So he had to get his ship in good order. They had 2 weeks travelling to and from Santiago, where they only met with O'Higgins once, and the rest of the time they were entertained by other people in the town before they rode back down to Santiago. And there were 2 weeks in the town just mopping up and reprovisioning before they sailed home. Now, monkey puzzle seed is for sale in Valparaiso market as a food product. So Menzies would have come across seeds in the market the moment he stepped off the ship, the very first day. And being the sort of inquiring man he is, he would probably have asked about them. And he would have been told where they came from. They came from further south, down Concepcion area, where they came up by boat, brought up to Valparaiso market, sold in the market. Some documents will tell you that they were always sold as cooked seed. So even if you tried to get the seed in the marketplace, it probably wouldn't have been viable. But there's a very interesting book produced, which is describing pine trees, published in 1828. And in it, the author, who has beautiful drawings of the monkey puzzle, says, I made these drawings from herbarium specimens placed by Menzies in the Banksian herbarium. Now, I had never, ever come across anybody making reference that Menzies brought back herbarium material as well as trees. Everybody just says Menzies came back with his 5 trees. So you then stop and put all that together and you think, how did Menzies get hold of seed, viable seed, and herbarium specimens of a tree he never saw? Because there are no monkey puzzles in that northern top of Chile. And there certainly weren't at the time when Menzies was there. And then you start thinking, well, if he comes across the seed in Valparaiso Market, chats around, the sailors would say to him, well, next time we're down in Concepcion, we'll get you some. Bring it back up to you. And Menzies saying, well, that's fine. I'm popping up to Santiago for a couple of weeks to see the bigwig. So when I get back, I'll get them from you. And I think that's what happened. I think that Menzies had them shipped up from Concepcion. And that was a very easy thing to do because you didn't have to go in high into the Andes to find a monkey puzzle tree. James McCrae, who went to Chile in 1825, simply in 1826 on his return to Chile, hopped on a boat, sailed down to Concepcion, walked up the high street, knocked on Dr. Green's door and said, can I have some seed off your tree in the back garden, please? And he collected all his seed from the tree from which that famous Dropmore monkey puzzle tree came, from the back garden of Dr. Green in Concepcion. So you just had to sail down to the port. Get it? So the sailors would have had no trouble getting Menzies cones, samples of twigs and branches, and the seed. And of course, the one unique thing about monkey puzzle cones is you cannot get a female cone, a mature female cone, because the moment the cones are mature, they disintegrate into a bundle of seed. But you can get male cones. They stay intact. And so when Menzies comes back, he comes back with intact male cones, he comes back with intact leaves and twigs, and he comes back with a packet of seed, basically. Well, actually, he'd grown it into trees.
So he's a botanist, basically, because that's what he's doing. He's doing the whole story of this tree. He's not just grabbing a few seeds in his pocket.
Correct.
He wants to understand what this is.
Yes, he's following the whole thing through. So that's how I believe he got his seed. I do not believe he got it from a meal table at all. And when I contacted the Natural History Museum and said, I believe you have some herbarium specimens of Menzies, and I was particularly interested in the male cone, they sent me a beautiful photograph of the male cone that they hold in their herbarium specimen, titled Menzies, proving that Menzies came back with herbarium specimens. But the other thing that came out in my story when I realised as I researched the Dropmore trees was, yes, Menzies introduced the first trees in 1795, and book after book after book will tend to tell you nothing much happened until the famous Veitch nursery sent their plant collector, William Lobb, to South America, and he sent bucket loads of Araucaria seeds back to the nursery. And thanks to Veitch and Lobb and the Veitch nursery growing these trees, they became widely distributed across the land, and Britain's craze for monkey puzzles took off. But that couldn't be true, because I'd got trees being planted by my great-great-grandfather, evidence of trees in Dropmore being planted before William Lobb even left the country. And not only that, I had built a file up of monkey puzzle research that told me that monkey puzzles were spread across the land. And John Claudius Loudon, the very famous botanist and magazine producer of the Gardener's Chronicle, wrote in his magazine, way before Lobb had even left the country, that nurserymen from Aberdeen down to Kent were selling monkey puzzle trees. So it didn't stack up. And so I started looking into the whole story and realised that the story of the monkey puzzle tree's arrival in this country had, rather like my family story, it had become a bit jumbled and it needed rewriting. And so I finished up writing a book, Araucaria, the monkey puzzle, to tell the story in a more accurate form.
So where does the Veitch and Lobb story come from, do you think?
The Veitch and Lobb story, again, comes from Victorianism. The Victorians loved to shout about their hyperbole almost about what they were doing. And of course, there were no advertising standards in those days to put things right. And the Veitch Nursery in 1881 published this book about conifers. And in it, they just categorically state that Menzies brings back the first trees, and then thanks to our wonderful collector, William Lobb, bringing seed back to the Veitch Nursery, we can flood the market with trees, and the monkey puzzle becomes immensely popular. And all researchers ever since have gone to that wonderful book, and it is a very authoritative book, have read this statement, have assumed it to be pristine correct. And the myth about Veitch and Lobb being important in the game comes from Veitch and Lobb. Nobody else. Well, it comes from Veitch's nursery. In fairness, both Veitch Senior and Lobb were dead by the time this book was produced, but it comes out of the Veitch Nursery. And when you actually go through the gardening magazines and you go through other records, you discover that other nurserymen were far more important in launching the monkey puzzle tree. In particular, Ewells of Great Yarmouth. Because Ewells of Great Yarmouth were selling trees and advertising trees even before William Lobb had sent his seed back to Britain.
And why were they so popular, do you think?
I think it's just the sheer novelty value. I think they just look so different to anything else that they became popular. I mean, they caused controversy. I mean, I love the Earl Duchy of Tortworth Estate over in Gloucestershire, who had 72 monkey puzzles on his estate, and had the courtesy to criticise the cottager for putting a tree in his little garden, little front garden. It didn't have enough room for it. And, oh, by the way, the really damning crime was leaving it in a flower pot. But then Earl Duchy had a very substantial estate and could afford to spread his 72 trees around in great glory.
Have you ever grown one?
I have never personally grown one to maturity. I have germinated a lot of monkey puzzle seed because I just find them an absolutely fascinating seed to study. And I do have half a dozen little monkey puzzle trees in my glass house as we speak.
That's wonderful. But you wouldn't plant one in your garden?
I don't have the space to show it off properly.
That's a word of warning to anyone who's listening to this thinking, actually, I'd love a monkey puzzle tree. How much space do you need?
Oodles. How much space have you got? I mean, I think we've all driven around the country and you all see monkey puzzle trees in locations where you know that the owner of the house must surely hate it by now, because it's scratching the windows, it's scraping across the gutters and the tiles, it's dropping horrible dead twigs on the lawn underneath it. And you think, why did you plant it there? Why not plant it miles away in a nice corner where you can stand back at a distance and just admire it?
So you wrote your book and you self-published 300.
Correct.
Sold out.
Correct.
What did you do with the profits?
Well, because I'd had a lot of help from some wonderful people, and in particular Martin Gardner of the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh, who had written the foreword for the book for me, and who had more or less rubber stamped and said, yeah, you're right, we've never believed the Menzies story, we've never, etc., etc. And they were helping a charity project in Chile, where they were encouraging the native people up in the Andes to run a project of reforestation, to grow. They were helping them to harvest the seeds, they were helping them to take cuttings off rare species, helping them to culture and propagate them, and then reforest and replant. And they were looking for funds to help fund this charity. So I sent all the proceeds from the book over to the Cura Railway project in Chile, high in the Andes, to help them with their work.
I think that is an absolutely wonderful end to the story.
Yes, thank you.
How many years have you been tracking this story, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, in the sense, when I was 10, I've been tracking it for 68 years.
Will you keep going?
Well,
is there more to learn?
Oh, there's more to learn, no question. Yes. Oh, yes, I think there's still refinements. I mean, even now, say, post the book, several things really came out. I mean, when I was doing the book, there was information. The information suggested that Lord Grenville bought one of his trees from a sale in the Horticultural Society, for example. And I consulted the Horticultural Society and was categorically advised the Horticultural Society never held sales. They never sold any of their plants. They always gave them away to members. And Lord Grenville was a member of the early Horticultural Society. And then, subsequent to publishing my book, I come across an advert, which was pointed out to me, by the way, by somebody, in 1830, for sale by the Horticultural Society, plants, including araucarias. Why? Because in 1830 it was still a fledgling organisation. They were short on money and long on plants, so they merged the two together and had a 2-week sale and raised themselves lots of money and sold lots of araucaria trees and other plants. Only time they ever had a sale, but they did have a sale, that's the point.
So that's where he got...
So that may be where one of the trees came from. It may be that we have evidence that he was given a monkey puzzle by the Society, but we also have evidence that he may have bought a monkey puzzle tree from the Society. And the records just don't tell us exactly what happened to all of these different trees.
I love the way that you kind of pull a thread and it just leads you to more and more, doesn't it?
It went on and on and on. The earliest tree to be advertised in a nursery sale in London is 1814. There's an advert for the Stockwell clearance sale, Stockwell Nursery in London, big famous nursery. Hundreds of thousands of trees, literally hundreds of thousands of trees. Took them 2 or 3 weeks to clear the nursery out altogether by public auction. 5 days a week, just non-stop. And there was an araucaria advertised for sale by that nursery. Where did it come from? How do we know? But it's the earliest record of a sale of a monkey puzzle in this country by a nurseryman.
Where does monkey puzzle come from?
That's another myth. It's sort of one of those things that you really can't really pin it down if you're really honest. Again, the books will all tell you it rose at Pencarrow estate in Cornwall. And that in 1834, the owner of Pencarrow went out and bought a monkey puzzle tree from Knight's Nursery. And Sir William Molesworth had a shooting party at his house in August that year, awaiting the delivery of his new tree, his first monkey puzzle. The tree arrives, and he orders the party out to the rockery at the base at the back of the Italian garden, and they have a planting ceremony for this wonderful new tree. And the tree is allegedly touched by an individual who says, feels the sharp prickles, this would puzzle a monkey to climb. And that is allegedly the origin of the story. Now, the problem of that is that story didn't come to light until about 1890. There's no question, when you look at the literature, the term monkey puzzle as we use it didn't really enter the literature until about the 1860s. Prior to that, it was the monkey's puzzle, the puzzle a monkey. There was the association of words, but not quite in the way that we now use it. That didn't really become cemented until the 1860s onwards. And then you've got to remember the French call it the despair de songe, the monkey's despair. So you start to ask yourself the question, did the French invent it, or because they had monkey puzzles in France at sort of the same time as we were getting monkey puzzles. So did it get carried over, and did the individual who made the joke at Pencarrow, had he already heard the name somewhere else, and he was just making it as a quip to an audience rather than an original first thought comment? So
who knows? There's a grain of truth in there somewhere.
There's a grain of truth in there somewhere. It entered the vernacular somehow, somewhere, but I don't actually believe it has it. I have my roots in Cornwall, by the way. The Gedye family roots are firmly in Cornwall, but I don't believe the monkey puzzle's common name comes from Cornwall. Philip Frost is Devon and Cornish, by the way, as well. So we are very much Cornish and Devon in our roots, but.
He'd be so proud, wouldn't he, of the work you have done to uncover the story?
I would hope so.
I hope that you have enjoyed this Monkey Puzzle plant story, offshoot and bonus episode. I know I always encourage you to leave a rating and or a review on your podcast app, but it really does help podcasters to know what their listeners think and helps others to discover the podcast. Thanks to those of you who have left reviews in the past or bought me a coffee on the Our Plant Stories website. It really means a lot. In my old Radio 4 days, you would toss the finished programme into tape library and head off to make the next one. There was always a Radio 4 audience. With a podcast, you're building an audience, and it is very exciting to see that happening. Thank you. Our Plant Stories is presented and produced by me, Sally Flatman. Thank you for listening. If you want to show your support for this podcast via Buy Me a Coffee, then the link is in the show notes or on the website ourplantstories.com. I promise you, your virtual coffee will go towards the podcast, not plants.